Manchester City's all-conquering treble-winning side breaking up. Ilkay Gundogan reveals offers are on the table, but Pep Guardiola reiterates his desire to keep his captain.
A very good evening to you. Welcome along to the Transfer Show. We also have an update on the futures of Kyle Walker and Bernardo Silva.
And away from Manchester City, we'll have the latest on the Chelsea exodus and James Maddison. And later on, we're going to be joined by Lee Hendry, Rob Earnshaw and Clinton Morrison.
Yeah, it's a busy evening here on Sky Sports News as Manchester United look set to miss out on a defensive target. We'll discuss another big summer for Erik ten Hag.
And with us here in the studio on the Transfer Show, a warm welcome to Rob Dorset and to Anton Toloui as well. Guys, let's get straight into it because there's actually a lot to talk about here, isn't there? We'll start with the treble winners, Manchester City. Rob, we were all set to begin with Ilkay Gundogan, but we've got a bit of a development regarding Kyle Walker, I believe.
Yeah, so we reported last night, didn't we, that Bayern Munich are interested in signing Kyle Walker. And there was some detail from our colleagues at Sky Deutschland saying how keen they were. My understanding is Kyle Walker wants to stay at Manchester City and he wants to sign an extension to his contract if possible. That's his preferred option. He absolutely loves it at Manchester City. They've just won the treble. Why would he want to leave? That's basically the way it's been described to me. And I would be staggered if Kyle Walker became a Bayern Munich player for next season. It's clear that Munich wants him, but let's see if they can come off with an offer that appeals to Manchester City. But of course, in any transfer deal, the clubs have to agree a fee, and then the player has to agree to go. And whilst I don't think, you know, there's no situation where he doesn't want to go to Munich, but he would rather stay at Manchester City. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all that if he signed an extension to that contract that he's got at the moment, only a year left on it. And we know that he's a massive Sheffield United fan. So I think, if anywhere, if Kyle Walker was going to go and end his career somewhere, you'd expect it possibly to be Bramall Lane. But that could be in years hence. He's got no plans to retire anytime soon. So I think that's much more likely than moving to the Bundesliga, is that whilst he's been hugely flattered by Bayern Munich's interest, I'd be staggered if he went there. Much more likely that he'll stay at Manchester City and probably sign an extension to that contract. But there's no rush to do that because he's got a year left of it. And City have no desire to sell him, I'm told, as well. So that's important to stress. And so with all that in mind, the story drifts a little bit, shall we say.
It certainly doesn't harm his contract negotiations, either, does it, at Manchester City?
A very good point, well made as well. And you wonder how much that's... I mean, look, he's 32 now, is he? And still at the peak of his powers. And you wonder how much. I mean, we're going to go on and talk about Manchester City and their transfer plans and Gundogan mighty go. You look at Bernardo Silva as well that we're going to be talking about. Is Pep Guardiola really going to allow three of his most important players to leave in this summer transfer window when they've just won the treble? I just don't see it. And that's why it fits with what I've been told today about Kyle Walker, that he has no desire to leave. He has no desire to go anywhere. In actual fact, he's having a great time at Manchester City. He's just won the treble with them. You saw the look on his face when he lifted the Champions League trophy. And so he'd much rather stay and sign an extended contract if at all possible.
Yeah, and the three players you mentioned as well, Rob, senior players in the squad as well. You think that they want to continue that continuity going forward for next season, Anton. Let's talk about one of their most senior players, which is their captain, of course, Ilkay Gundogan. And the talk continues, you know, whether there's going to be a new contract, whether he's going to leave. What's the update so far?
You want to know, Manchester City fans want to know.
Yeah.
Well, Ilkay Gundogan is in Gelsenkirchen right now, his hometown, preparing for Germany's game against Colombia tomorrow night. And the reporters that were speaking to him today wanted to know where he's going next. And he was asked, and he was pretty open about one part of it and said, look, I actually had an offer from Borussia Dortmund, the club he spent 5 years, the club he won Bundesliga with. But he said, no, I don't fancy that. I don't want to... That's not the project I'm looking for. So he's pretty much ruled out not just a return to Borussia Dortmund, but I think a return to Bundesliga, to be brutally honest. So that's some good news for Manchester City fans. There you go. There's one potential rival out of the way. But we've also heard from Pep Guardiola today talking about the man, or Ilkay Gundogan, unsurprisingly. He was at a golf event in Catalonia, asked about Gundogan, and he said, look, I hope he stays with us. And that's been Pep Guardiola's message all season. I hope he stays. I hope he stays. But he did go on a little bit further and said, if he goes to Barca, it'll be an extraordinary signing. Mentioning Barcelona by name and also mentioning Xavi by name, but saying Xavi has called him many times. So look, he openly admits that there are other clubs interested. There are huge clubs interested. We know Arsenal are also interested in Ilkay Gundogan as well. Ilkay Gundogan's contract runs out in 11 days' time. That's the thing, right? But he's played, 60 games this season or something ridiculous like that for club and country. So he's been very focused this season and hasn't wanted to go too deep into these contract discussions. But now he's got, a week and a half to decide what he wants to do?
Yeah. Incredible, really, that it's come to the point where, as you say, with the best part of 10 days to go, Manchester City's captain is going to be out of contract and they haven't yet tied up a new one, which seems to point to the fact that he's going to be on the move, isn't he?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I think it's interesting, going back to what Rob was saying about sort of the senior players, we talk about Bernardo Silva and Kyle Walker as well. Well, there's no obvious succession plan in the centre of midfield, is there? And that's, I think, the key thing. We were expected to talk about players that were going to come in to Manchester City in centre midfield this off-season, and yet we're still talking about the most pivotal player. Well, maybe not the most pivotal player. Roger was incredible as well. Oh, what a bad problem to have. But, it's that's the thing, isn't it? It's what happens if one of those two goes. See City have the strength and depth to go out there. There are other options they're looking at. We know that. We know that they are in talks with Chelsea about Mateo Kovacic. We know they're interested in him. They know what the price will get him through the door. We know the fact that they can easily agree personal terms. We know the player's open to a move. He's only got 12 months left on his contract. We also know they're kind of lurking in the background when it comes to Declan Rice as well and monitoring that situation. All this depends on what Ilkay Gundogan wants to do in the next 11 days.
OK, I'll tell you what then, Anton, hold that thought, because let's hear now from the Man City chairman, Khaldoon Al-Mubarak, on Gundogan's future.
To be the captain of this club in this historic treble, lifting the Premier League first and then the FA Cup, the Champions League, he will go down. He will go down in the folklore of Manchester City forever. I remember him when he came in. Always, but he's a captain. He is a captain, and I hope there's more chapters to that legacy. Hard work, commitment, always, humbleness, winning mentality. When you need him in the big games, he's always there.
Khaldoon Al-Mubarak, the City chairman there on Gundogan. We'll wait to see what happens then with the captain, whether Kovacic comes in from Chelsea, as you mentioned there, Anton, which moves us on nicely to Chelsea, doesn't it? We're going to talk about Kai Havertz, his future there in a little more depth in a moment. First, though, let's stay with you, Anton, and go through some of the other Chelsea players that could be on the way out. Yeah, I was going to say, the list is endless. I mean, there are a lot of names. Let's do this as quickly as you can. Go.
OK, who do you want to start with?
Conte.
N'Golo Conte, OK, fine. Fan favourite, I like that. He's out of contract, another one in a week and a half. There is a contract offer on the table from Chelsea. However, he wants to go and face a new challenge, so he's off to Al Ittihad. Deal's pretty much all done. Personal terms, medical. Expect him to be a player for the Saudi champions and a teammate of Karim Benzema soon.
OK, let's go next. Edouard Mendy.
Edouard Mendy, OK, fine. He's in talks with Al Ahly, again, in Saudi Arabia. Now, he's an interesting one because they weren't even in the Saudi Pro League last season. They won the Saudi First Division. That just shows how much money there is in Saudi football right now. So, again, he's in talks about a permanent move to the Saudi First Division champions.
Next, Koulibaly.
Kalidou Koulibaly in talks with Al Hilal, who finished third in the Saudi Pro League last season.
There's a theme here. There's definitely a theme. There's definitely
Inter Milan also interested in him, but can only really afford to take him on loan. Obviously, we all know how successful he was in Serie A, but as it stands, obviously, Chelsea want to try to get these players out on permanent deals. The Saudi club are the favourites.
OK, I think there's still some names to go. How about Hakim Ziyech next? Anything on him?
Guess which country he's linked with. He could be a potential teammate of Cristiano Ronaldo, because Al Nassr are in talks with Hakim Ziyech and Chelsea about a permanent move for him as well.
And last but not least, Romelu Lukaku. Serie A return?
Probably not, because Inter can't really afford to take him permanently. They're open to a loan move, which means who can afford a permanent move for Romelu Lukaku? Well, there are various Saudi clubs doing due diligence on the situation, but at the moment, no bids on the table. But if he does move on a permanent deal, that seems the likely target at the moment if he's interested in a move that way.
OK, Rob, as you suggested, it seems like there is a theme to their transfer policy this summer. Is that fair to say?
Look, I think you've got to look at this from a Chelsea perspective, and they're back to Plan A, aren't they? They're back to where they started before they sacked Graham Potter, because it's been a tumultuous 12 months for them. It really has. And not just in the management situation, but also in the players and the number of players they've signed and the players that they've turned over. And so it is a huge squad. It's an unmanageable squad. I don't know how they cope with training sessions because you've just got so many players that can't be involved, and they're top quality players. It's almost like fantasy football, isn't it? And it hasn't worked.
Hunger Games first day of pre-season. That's going to be.
Yeah. So they have to clear it out. They've got a new manager in place, and so. I'm sure he's had a big influence on what they're going to do, and he's probably had the final say in who should go. But it feels like this is a reset for Chelsea, and it feels like a sort of transfer window that will have to be a reset for them when they've got to lose all those players. Not just because if they carried on spending with the wages that they did last season, they would be way out in terms of their financial fair play considerations in 2 years' time. Remember, it goes over a 3-year period. So they're OK. They overspent last year, but they can make that back. They've got to start making that back. They can't keep signing players. And it's pretty clear that with a new manager in place, they'd like to sign some new players. They've got to get some out the door first. So, and what I think the biggest problem they're going to have is moving these players on, because they're all on huge wages. We know that the Premier League clubs pay bigger wages than most other clubs around Europe. So who can afford to buy these players? Who are these players prepared to take wage cuts to move elsewhere? It's not going to be easy to get these players out. And that's why Saudi have got such an easy option here, because they're one of the few countries, one of the few set of clubs that can afford to pay the sort of wages that Chelsea have been paying. So it's no surprise to me at all that 4 or 5 players that Anton's listed there are linked with moves to Saudi Arabia. That may be the only option for some of those players.
It's so interesting, isn't it, Anton? Because a few years ago, I remember when the Chinese Super League became the place that a lot of players were starting to join. I mean, Oscar from Chelsea went, didn't he? We don't hear much about him ever since, but it seems to be that the Saudi Arabian League is really flexing its muscles at the moment.
It is, and it's too. These players are interesting because they're all 30 or above as well, aren't they? So it's that kind of, OK, fine, so probably one last big payday. And like Rob was saying, these kind of players are so difficult to get off a Premier League wage bill. We've seen Chelsea, Manchester United, we've seen all the big clubs struggle when they've deemed a player's time of the club is up, but there's no open market for them. They go out on loans for a couple of seasons, and this just definitively gets a player off the wage bill. But it's interesting because we're talking about Mendy, Koulibaly, Ziyech, and Conte between 30 and 32. But there are they are also targeting young players. Ruben Neves, as we know, is pretty much gone to Saudi Arabia as well. There's reports today that Bernardo Silva is another target, and he's 28. Ruben Neves 27. So we're talking about they're targeting players at all different times in their career now as they try to sort of really make a statement. The Saudi League.
Cristiano Ronaldo said this was happening, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
In a recent news conference, he said we will see more players coming to this league.
Yeah, and I'm sure the Saudi Pro League doesn't want to do what MLS did in the early days and invest heavily in veterans and then actually think, it doesn't quite work. And now it's a much more successful league, so they have a mix between the two, between the high-paid veterans and really some exciting young players that they can move on. And that's clearly what I think their long-term vision is going to be for Saudi football. But they need the stars, but also they need players kind of at various different age groups, and that's what they're trying to do. But, you're telling me Hakim Ziyech, Kalidou Koulibaly were going to be in Saudi Arabia 12 months ago. People just wouldn't have believed that.
It's a really interesting one, though, when you compare it with the MLS, because the MLS used to be that, where England's best players, or the best players that were playing in England, I shouldn't say English players, the European players playing in England would go to the MLS for the twilight of their career, get a payday, but have a nice place to live and play in a slightly less physical form of the game, shall we say. The MLS is struggling to attract players now in the face of this extra money and the extra firepower that the Saudi leagues have got.
I wonder what the Messi factor will have in that.
It'd be massive.
We might see more players now starting to go to MLS again, like we are seeing since Ronaldo's.
But Jesper, I think that's really significant because don't forget, because of the franchise system in America, the MLS put up that money for Messi. It's not just one club paying for him. So the MLS have probably looked at what's happening in Saudi, realised they've got some real competition there for world stars, so they've had to pay the money to get Messi, to try and rebuild it. In the same way that Ronaldo has kind of rejuvenated that Saudi market, if you like, and shown the path. I'm sure the people at the MLS are hoping that Lionel Messi do exactly the same thing.
Let's move on to a player that could well be leaving Chelsea, but rather than going to Saudi Arabia, moving just a couple of miles up the road. Kai Havertz to Arsenal.
Yeah.
How close is this, Anton?
I mean, it's still rumbling. Discussions are still taking place. I don't think we're at a stage yet where, massive bids are on the table and, we're on the finite part of negotiations. But, yeah, there's definitely interest from Arsenal. They seem to be the favourites right now to bring Kai Havertz in. We know Kai Havertz has 2 years left in his contract. We know Chelsea are open to a deal because this is the time they can get the most money for him. And, Kai Havertz is one of those players that coaches seem to absolutely love. Everyone that's worked with him, he brings that versatility. But, we know he's been a subject of interest from Bayern before. Well, we know Bayern aren't in for him this time because they're actually looking to offload some forwards before they make some decisions and sign some defenders. But it's interesting because they're saying, well, actually, we've been told that he fancies himself now as a forward, and that's maybe well be his future at Arsenal if he goes. But he's a player that's been, I think, hampered by a lack of form and a lot of versatility. And I think if he can get a big move and locked in position, we could see the Kai Havertz that tore up Bundesliga during the pandemic at Leverkusen.
Yeah. Let's move on to Manchester United, Anton, because we haven't heard much discussion of late on Marcus Rashford, but we know that his future's still uncertain. Do you have an update for us today?
Yeah, and it's potentially quite an exciting one for Manchester United fans because we know that the negotiations between the player and the club have been going on for some time. And there were reports earlier about, a deal's in place, and it's not quite that far, but we're told today that there is increasing optimism among both parties that a deal is going to get closer. So things are trending in the right direction for Marcus Rashford to sign a new and improved long-term deal at Manchester United. Now, no time frame on that just yet, but things are looking more optimistic.
OK. Gents, thank you very much for that. Do stay with us. Marcus Rashford, by the way, in the starting 11 for England tonight as they take on North Macedonia. And we will keep you right up to date with that and the rest of the European games across the evening here on Sky Sports News. But up next, news from Tottenham, Manchester United on the way as well. More news on them and an update on the future of James Maddison. Stay with us.
Discrimination. Let's kick it out.
Welcome back to the transfer show. Rob and Anton still with us. Let's get stuck into to Leicester City now. Rob, I think it's going to be a big summer since their relegation. Of course, got a new manager in place in Enzo Maresca. And it's going to be so interesting to see how many of their Premier League stars he can keep hold of. No more so than James Maddison. What's the latest?
He's the jewel in the crown, isn't he? So look, there will be a bit. Let's put you in the picture about what the situation is at Leicester. There will be a big clear out. It's as simple as that. But they will not sell any players on the cheap. But it could well be that 4 or 5 of Leicester's best players leave the club this summer. What future, by the way, for Jamie Vardy? Has he got the appetite and maybe the energy levels for a full season in the Championship, 46 games plus? That hasn't been mentioned at all yet. But I think the interesting factor here is that Leicester are planning to be back in the Premier League next season. And so they don't want to sell everybody now and then have to rebuy them all in 12 months' time. But the reality is that they have to cut their cloth accordingly, and there are certain players that are Premier League players, and James Maddison is the epitome of those. From what I've been told, Leicester are likely to want in excess of £60 million for James Maddison. Don't expect them to sell for any less than £50 million. And I think it would be a much higher figure than that if he had longer left on his contract. So he's got 1 year left on his existing contract, which leaves Leicester in a bit of a tricky situation with regards to him, because I think most people, most agents you speak to, most clubs would tell you that James Maddison's probably worth more than £50 million. But with a year left on his contract, that brings his value right down. We know that Spurs and Newcastle are interested, but there may be more as time passes. Spurs offered what was described to me as a paltry amount for both Maddison and Harvey Barnes recently, but that was a speculative thing. I don't think that they were seriously thinking they were going to get both of them for that. But it's pretty clear that James Maddison will move if the money is right, and that's the key factor here. What is the valuation of James Maddison? I think it's a really difficult one. We were talking about it before, weren't we?
How do you value James Maddison? Because you talk about the talent of the players, undisputed talent, for James Maddison, but the problem is, you need bigger, richer clubs to come in, and the more interest there is from those kind of clubs, the higher the value is going to be. Well, Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United, Arsenal, they don't need him. So that means what? Out of the other clubs sort of around the top of the league, Brighton, he doesn't fit the profile for a signing for them. Maybe not even Aston Villa. They've got a lot of attacking players. So who else is there? Well, it's Tottenham and it's Newcastle. As Rob said, Tottenham do things in a slightly different way, and they won't be pushing for 50, 60 million straight out the gate, which means Newcastle. And if they're the only club in, they can dictate the market. So you can want 50 million if you want. Good luck, you ain't going to get it.
I think the interesting thing as well is that Leicester pay big salaries. They are, in the rankings, they are the 7th biggest payers in the Premier League, or rather, they were. They're not in the Premier League anymore. But these players that we're talking about at Leicester, Maddison at the tip of that iceberg, are on big money. And so if they're going to go somewhere else, they're going to expect at least the same. And Anton's quite right. Who can afford to pay that sort of money? I don't think Spurs would pay the sort of salary that James Maddison would want. So it does come back to Newcastle. I've just got this sneaking suspicion that Newcastle will probably come in for him, probably be prepared to pay the money, because he's somebody that in a position they haven't got. He can play as a number 10. He can play wide. He's a good attacking option. He improves their squad. And the question is, if James Maddison goes to one of the big 4, does he improve their squad? Is he going to get enough game time? So, look, if you ask my gut feeling, I think it would be Newcastle. But again, I stress, it comes down to meeting Leicester's valuation. And they're not going to be in a hurry to sell any of these players because they're hoping to get back in the Premier League.
Don't they have a very similar issue with Harvey Barnes as well?
Yeah, they do. They do. And actually, from what I've been told, Harvey Barnes has more suitors than James Maddison, because it's very obvious what Harvey Barnes is. He's a pacey winger, very direct, scores goals, and so a lot of clubs would like that. And even the elite clubs in the Premier League could see him as a squad player who could come off the bench and make a difference. So I think he appeals to a lot. 4 Premier League clubs are interested in him right now, is what I've been told.
That's the bidding war you're talking about, Anthony.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. And look, those are likely to be possibly Arsenal, Newcastle, West Ham, Spurs, is what I've been told. But again, the value is the issue again. He's a younger player. He's got plenty of time on his contract. What is his asking price? And this is where it's a bit of a mystery, because his asking price is what Leicester are prepared to accept. And they know the player wants to play in the Premier League. So they will have to be a little bit respectful to the player, but they're not going to let their star assets go on the cheap. It's as simple as that.
Great use of the word suitors. That's right. Very Shakespearean.
Thank you.
Let's come to you, Anton. You both mentioned Tottenham there for both of those Leicester players. I mean, they're going to be busy, we know, this summer. New manager there as well. David Raya, they're looking at a goalkeeper, we know that. And he's expressed where he wants to be next season already, hasn't he? What's happening?
Look, he's come out over the weekend and said, look, you know, I know my situation. Brentford can put a valuation on it, but if it's too high, clubs won't come in. So he's not saying he's frustrated, but by stating the fact, it shows some kind of frustration, doesn't it? So look, we know that Brentford value him at £40 million, and that's putting a lot of clubs off, considering he's out of contract in 12 months' time. So he says that he wants to go away, he wants to win trophies, he wants to be playing in Europe. But no, he also says, look, I love this club, and I gained promotion with this club and turned down interest from other clubs before signing the new contract. So he's obviously trying to be a politician, be diplomatic about this, but also force the issue of, look, 40 million is too high, I want to leave.
OK. We've got time for one more, I think, Anton. You gave us news on Marcus Rashford earlier in the show, but you have news on a player that Man United have been interested in as well.
Yeah, Kim Min-jae, the Napoli centre-back. It's bad news for Manchester United, though. As we've been reporting all week, that it's Bayern Munich who are very much at the front of the queue. And look, we expect them to meet his release fee, which is a complicated, convoluted one, because it's one that kind of dictates about how much the clubs are earning, and it's linked to financial. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But look, basically, it's between.
Let's not go into it.
Absolutely, he didn't even try. No attempt there. He just
between 42 and 59 million pounds. That Bayern have made sure that he is the player they want to sign.
It's big money.
It is big money, but he's Serie A Defender of the Year. You know, he's just helped Napoli win their first Scudetto for years. You know, he has done so much for that club. He filled the Koulibaly hole at Napoli, didn't he? So look, he is seen, and he's still in his mid-20s, so he's only going to get better. Bayern are losing two big players, potentially Benjamin Pavard and Luka Hernandez, this summer as well. They want to go out and get the best defenders possible, hence the links with Kyle Walker, and hence why they're trying to sign Min-jae from Napoli. So sorry, Manchester United fans.
Not your fault.
No.
Anton, Rob, thank you very much indeed. We're going to make a change here in the studio. We're going to sub off these two, and we're going to bring on three players. Lee Hendry, Rob Earnshaw, Clinton Morrison, all joining us. I know you're not allowed to bring on an extra player, but as Anton says, who cares?
Who cares?
It's happening after the break. Welcome back to the Transfer Show. We can welcome our guests here in the studio. We're going to carry on the transfer theme before we then turn to tonight's Euro qualifiers, which kick off in 15 minutes from now. Very pleased to see Rob Earnshaw and Lee Hendry are here with us, and Clinton should be joining us shortly from our Wilmslow studio. But let's just talk about some of the big names we were chatting about with Rob Dorset and Anton Louis in the first half hour. I'll start with Ilkay Gundogan. Lee, I'll come to you. 10 days left on his Manchester City contract. There are other clubs apparently interested. He was their captain, scored some huge goals for them. I mean, can City really afford to let him go?
I mean, it's a big one, isn't it? Because I think, as you said there, Jules, I think what he's contributed to that football club is quite remarkable. And I think he's gone under the radar at times. You know, when you look at midfielders who have been probably one of the best around, and in the Premier League, you know, he speaks for himself. What he's done it again this season, and he continues to do so. So for me, I think they've got to try their best to keep hold of him. I really do. I think what he brings to that midfield area is, he's quite unique in the way he can score goals. He can sit. He can do all sorts of roles in that midfield area. So I think that they've really got to push the boat. But the longer that clock ticks on, you do feel like he's obviously weighing up or looking at maybe another potential to leave the club.
Rob, are you surprised it's got this far? I think it was like 10 or 11 days left until his contract's over. He was on the release list, but it doesn't mean that he's going as of yet. But I mean, they're not biding. They're biding their time at the moment, aren't they? But what do you think's going to happen?
Do you know what? I think he'll probably leave.
Really?
I think reluctantly. I think Pep Guardiola wants him to stay, and I believe he wants to stay. So that's the tricky part. I think the contract, I think also the time of where he is in his career, because sometimes, you're in your career, you want to stay, but also in the back of your mind, you're kind of feeling like a fresh new challenge. What is he, 32, I believe? I think he's actually probably going to leave. I think the best thing for him is to stay, because I think he's probably the most underrated world-class player that there is out there. He's brilliant. He scores goals. He's intelligent. He's creative. He knows in the big moments he delivers. So he does everything a top midfielder does. And for some reason, people still kind of put him under the radar. I think he's brilliant. He's unbelievable. If he goes, somebody's going to get an unbelievable player.
But if he wants to stay and the club want him to stay, then why wouldn't he then? As a player, as a former player, tell us why he might not be a Man City player next season.
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, probably the one thing that it's left it this late is probably there's negotiations probably from the player and what he wants, what he values himself at, and what he believes that probably contract-wise, the level, and also expectation, because it could be something not. People always think it's always kind of like the contract, the money side of it. No, it's also the promise of, okay, how many minutes am I going to play? Because he's at a stage where he wants to play every game. So it could be those things, and also the other thing is, I think for him it's going to be. He wants to stay. The club probably wants him to stay, but the club probably wants him to stay far away from his valuation. So that's very, very difficult. So it's hard for a player because you have to still try and meet some way of, there's negotiation from this end, negotiation from this end. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll find out because eventually something's going to have to give. And, I think Gundogan should stay with Man City. I think he's just got so much to give to Man City. You just see that 2 or 3 month period of the end of the season, he's just, he's world class anyway, but he just delivers. But I think somebody, for me, if I'm out there, if I'm another football club, I'm thinking that is my number one target. Gundogan is the number one target. Bring him in. If I was Arsenal, if I was Liverpool, if I was Manchester United, even I doubt he would go there, but. I would be looking at somebody like that and thinking, what a huge, huge asset that he would bring to your football club.
Let's move on from Manchester City and talk about Chelsea. And we'll bring in Clinton, who joins us now from our studio up in Wilmslow. Clinton Morris, good evening to you. Clinton, I'm going to come to Chelsea. And, we were hearing from Anton just now, all these Chelsea players who look to be moving on and quite possibly to Saudi Arabia. Conte, Mendy, Koulibaly, Ziyech, Lukaku even. Just how big a summer do you think this is going to be, Clinton, at Chelsea in terms of a turnover under Pochettino?
No, I think it's going to be a big turnover, to be fair. But we've spoke about it many times with Pochettino. I think he'll be happy. He's not going to be happy losing the quality of players, but he'll be happy. They've got too many players. Chelsea have signed too many players. We say it all the time. We said it loads of times last season. The squad's too big, and Pochettino likes to work with a small squad, around 24, 25 players. So if he loses players, he's going to have to improve it, because he is losing some top players. And at the moment, everyone wants to go to Saudi Arabia and play football, because the money they're getting offered over there is ridiculous at the moment. So, yeah, it's going to be difficult for Pochettino, but I think he's the right man for Chelsea. But they need a better season than they did have last season, because it was nowhere near good enough.
Lee, are we going to see this happening more and more, as Clinton was saying there, players going over to play in Saudi Arabia, you know, obviously big money being talked about. Do you think that is, as Cristiano Ronaldo suggested, going to be the destination for a lot more Premier League players?
I think it is. It's the next one, isn't it? I think, you know, we've seen it sort of filter through. You know, everyone was going to the States. There was throwing big money at it. This is the new venue and the new area to go to, isn't it? Where it seems like every player that's coming to an end of a contract or in the last year of a contract, it just shows that money talks, really, doesn't it? And this is where I think we're going to start seeing lots of players venturing over there. Everyone seems to be getting linked over there, and that's just because they can pay that sort of demand on wages, fees. It doesn't seem to bother them at all, and that's why I think, you know, just going back to what Clinton was saying, I think Chelsea, you know, the way their squad is at the moment, wouldn't surprise me half of their, you know, players that they brought in will end up going over there. But that looks like it's going to be a place that's really going to hit off. I was out in Dubai recently, and they talked how big and what they're putting in, and the value of money that they're putting in out there. They want that to be something special out there, and that's why it's attracting so many big players.
The only thing I worry about that and Saudi Arabia, I think it's great that they're trying to bring some of the top, biggest stars in the world. The worry for it is still that players going over there just for money and not for career. Because you can also get big money out here. So it's not just about the money. Obviously, it's huge out in Saudi Arabia. But there comes a time where a football player, you want to also play for your career and to play at the highest level. Right now, the highest level, of course, is Europe. You know, everybody understands worldwide that the highest place is Europe, like the Premier League, like, of course, all the European leagues. And that's the worry for me, is some players will be tempted for just the money and go and play in Saudi Arabia just for the money.
Well, a prime example of that, Rob, is a month or so ago, we heard from, who was going to talk about there, was had a total blank there. Total blank. Ruben Neves at Wolves.
Neves, yeah.
He was saying he wanted to play Champions League football, yeah, and Barcelona were linked. And then we now hear he's probably off to Saudi Arabia. That's where you start to question what's the motive behind this.
But, Jules, I think we're not going to sit here and say that money don't talk. You know, there's no doubt of that. I'm with Rob. You know, I think certain players have got a mentality of winning trophies, and certain players have got that mentality of getting to probably an older age in their career, if you like. I wouldn't say the back end, but, you know, when you get into an age where you're thinking, well, I can earn X amount for 5-6 years, I'm comfortable, I can live a luxury life. I think that's where certain players have to look at the bigger picture, and I think that's where Rob's saying is that, you know, do you want to win trophies? Do you want to play in Europe? That's the ultimate, and obviously, you know, Neves, I would have thought he would have gone to one of the top Premier League clubs.
He's 26.
Yeah, that's what I mean, and he's at a great age. So
right?
you think to yourself, what is he signed? No doubt signed a 4, 5, 6 year contract there, where he's going to be stable. He's going to be earning stupid amounts of money. And I know what Rob's saying, but I don't think some of these Premier League clubs, unless he's going to go to City or he's going to go to a Chelsea, are going to match them demands. And that's where it's blowing the football clubs out of the water. And this is where there's a bit of a worrying situation where we're going to see possibly a lot of our big players in the Premier League that we see week in, week out, going over to Saudi.
Let's bring Clinton in again. Clinton, do you think it's a league that could rival the Premier League eventually?
No chance. The Premier League's the best league in the world. Listen, it's a good league for now. It just reminds me of a few years ago when everyone was going over to China and playing football and earning massive money. Listen, Saudi Arabia is a wealthy country. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are going to go over there. I do think the league will take off. Cristiano Ronaldo said it when he first went there. It will take off. You see big names like Karim Benzema and N'Golo Kante, and there's other top players that will go there. But do I ever think it will rival the Premier League? No chance. Listen, we will lose players from the Premier League to go go and play in Saudi Arabia League because they can earn massive money over there. But at the end of the day, you could be on someone over here earning 200 grand a week and winning 12 major honours, someone like a Kyle Walker who's won numerous titles at Man City and he's earned big money. And then I understand it when you get to 30, 31 and you want to go for another big payday and then you go in there like Cristiano Ronaldo done, like Kante's doing, like Benzema's doing. I get it. But I don't get the Ruben Neves one. Not now, because I think he's a bright talent. I thought he was excellent for Wolves and I think he might regret it, but at the end of the day, money talks in football, and if you're earning that amount of money come the end of your career, you might be happy. But I'd have liked to see Ruben Neves go to a Champions League team.
I'm aware that you guys have got matches to watch in about 3 minutes' time, but we want to talk Manchester United before we do that in the European qualifiers. Clinton, I'm going to come back to you because the story we had on Marcus Rashford half an hour ago was that there is increasing optimism from both camps, him and Manchester United, that a new long-term deal can be agreed with Rashford to stay at Manchester United. I mean, after the season he had last season, just how important is it that they keep hold of him?
Yeah, they need to keep hold of him because obviously, I've said it many a times, Man United need a number 9. Obviously, I can't see them getting Harry Kane this season. I could see him probably staying at Tottenham. But for Marcus Rashford to sign a new deal and stay at Man United, I think it's great for the football club and it's great for Marcus Rashford himself because I think he's an outstanding player. I wouldn't say he basically carried the team last season because they've had a lot of top players around them. But in the goal-scoring front, I thought he was outstanding on the front foot. You asked him to play on the left, through the middle, or on the right. He was always a threat. I think his best position, if you ask him, is on the left. But he can play through the middle as a number 9 because his movement's outstanding. And when he gets in front of goal, he's ice cool. So if they can do that, that is the first tick for Man United moving on this summer because I think they still need to sign 3 or 4 players to go and compete with the likes of Man City. But I think tying Marcus Rashford down to a new deal will be great business for Man United because I think he's been outstanding.
Lee Clinton saying 3 or 4 players for Man United to sign to challenge for next season. Do you feel like they will be able to get a prize possession like Harry Kane, or do you just not see that deal happening?
I'd like to see it happen. I would,
yeah.
Because I think if they did bring the likes of Kane in, I mean, if they brought a Declan Rice in, and obviously keeping hold of Marcus Rashford, I think that's when you can start to look at Manchester United and feel that they can be a force. I think last season they showed glimpses of what they're capable of doing. I think they've got a brilliant manager. I think he's done so many good things. He's starting to put the foundations in at the football club, and straight away he stamped his mark on things. So I do feel if they could get a Harry Kane, I think it's been crying out for quite some time that they haven't had an out-and-out number 9. And I feel if they can get and solve that solution with the players that they've got in that team and the squad of players that they have around in the manager, I think they can be a force. I really do. I don't know if they can quite put it up against Man City because I just feel that they're so strong. But I do feel that is an area if they can solve that, I think they'll be a massive force next season.
Yeah, just quickly, Rob. Clinton thinks 3 or 4 players United need. Would you agree, more or less?
Yeah, I would agree. The one thing that's still kind of missing, the piece, I think Ten Hag is going to be looking right now and thinking, where's our biggest problem at the back? Centre-backs. We need... I think he's going to be looking at least 2 that he's looking... OK, these will play generally. I think Lisandro Martinez, he's brilliant. And I think he's looking at probably 2 others. And maybe even a left-back and a right-back as well. Because I think, of course, number 1 is can you bring in a forward? If Marcus Rashford is missing... They lack goals. They lack that threat. That's very, very obvious. I actually think it probably won't be Harry Kane because I just feel it's just being talked about for so long. I think if it was going to be done, it would be done already. And I don't think that's going to be the case. So I think they'll be looking somewhere else. But they'll definitely want Harry Kane. It's just whether they can get him or not or push it across the line. But they'll have to pay huge.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. OK, guys, thank you very much for the transfer discussions, but we've got to move on. As Jules alluded to there, to tonight's Euro qualifiers. They are just about to get underway. Do stay with us. We'll keep you right up to date with all of them here on Sky Sports News. That's next.
Together, we can change it.
Welcome back. It's a busy night of European qualifiers with England, Wales, Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland all in action, all in a way. We're across all of them for you here on Sky Sports News. Let's see how things have started. England up against North Macedonia at Old Trafford, looking to make it 4 wins out of 4. Lee Hendry's watching this one for us. And Trent Alexander-Arnold back in midfield.
Yes. I mean, it was obvious, wasn't it? He had a brilliant evening. The weekend, and you just felt he had to step back into that role. I think this will be a bit of a different test for him. I think North Macedonia certainly will ask her. That's where the area where I feel that they're quite strong, actually. They're just on the attack at the moment. But yeah, it's great to see him in there again. Hopefully, he can reproduce the same sort of performance, because he was brilliant playing in that more advanced role. You know, he's got the quality to pick players out. Them little clever runs that he picked out of Saka. Brilliant to see him back in there again.
OK, Lee, thanks very much.
Rob, how's it started for Wales? Because they're up against Turkey tonight in Turkey, and they had such a disappointing result last time out. They need a response tonight. How have they started?
Started OK. Pretty usual. First, probably 5 minutes. They're kind of just feeling themselves out, allowing Turkey to have the ball a little bit. And just obviously a couple of changes. Ben Davies is out. Birth of his baby, so he's out. Obviously, Kiefer Moore got sent off the other day. I think Brennan Johnson's playing up top, which is a slightly different dynamic, because normally they rely on that big man a little bit. But I actually like this way more, because I actually feel like it's been coming. It needs a bit of a change of dynamic. He's a bit more speedy. He can run in behind. He can come short. And the combination of him and the likes of Harry Wilson, Dan James, it's more speed and. I quite like it, so we'll see how it goes. Right now, a little bit tentative right now, but doing OK, still 0-0, 5 minutes gone.
Yeah, OK, thank you.
Rob, thanks very much indeed. Wales looking for a response tonight. Republic of Ireland looking for a result. They've lost their first 2 games in qualifying. In fact, Stephen Kenny, apparently, if you believe the press, is under a bit of pressure for his job in this qualifying campaign as well. Clinton Morrison, he's got Gibraltar at home. They've beaten them 14-0 in their 4 matches on aggregate. He couldn't have handpicked a better team, could he, to get back on track?
No, you're spot on, Jules. He's under huge pressure over in Ireland. The fans are not happy. The Greece result was nowhere near good enough. But they have started on the front foot, but you expect that. And that's not being disrespectful to Gibraltar. You expect Ireland to win. So there's a good play down the right-hand side. Jason Knight whipped a ball in, and McGrath, who's coming tonight, had a shot. It's a comfortable save from the goalkeeper. But the results have been nowhere near good enough. He needs a good performance and a good victory tonight. But you're spot on, Jules. He's under massive pressure. Still 0-0.
Northern Ireland in action tonight as well, up against Kazakhstan. Sammy McElroy's watching this one for us. And after that, late heartbreak, really, against Norway. Sammy, how have they started in this one?
Well, the game hasn't kicked off yet. The players are just out in the park warming up. But it's a game tonight. I think Michael O'Neill expects to win if he wants to keep around about the leaders in the group. Let's hope they can do that.
OK, Sammy, 0-0 for now, 8 minutes in. Thank you.
Let's get back to Old Trafford, shall we? England playing their first game there since 2007. The other changes in the team tonight, I mentioned that Trent keeps his place in midfield. Rashford's back in the side on his home ground, of course, and Walker and Stones are back into the team. And I guess this shows the strength and depth that England have got. You know, when Trippier, Gay and Maddison make way, they can bring back in Walker and Stones, who've hopefully got over their Champions League celebration.
It is. I mean, you can see why Gareth Southgate has got a bit of a headache in his selections, because, when you've got the versatility of bringing players back into the squad. Rashford, stands out a million miles, doesn't he? Walker, you've got so much pace, and then you've still got the likes of Bellingham, who's obviously injured, who's going to come back into the fold. It's great, because I feel that this is where England now have to take that next step. They've started really well here as it goes, Jules. Saka's just had a brilliant chance. And that's when I look at the pace that they have forward, when you've got Rashford, Saka making them bits of movements, and obviously Trent's playing in that more advanced role. Henderson even joining in, because he's got that little bit of protection with Declan Rice just sitting protecting the back four, if you like. And then you look at the likes of Stones, who can come and step in, which he's been doing for Manchester City. So it looks so exciting, but it still remains 0-0, and England have been, by far, they've just dominated the ball.
Lee, we've only got about 20 seconds, but just in the build-up to this, we heard Gareth Southgate saying that the players are tapping each other up transfer-wise. This is the transfer show, so does that happen on the international scene?
I mean, obviously, being around the 21s and the full squad, you know, you always get the lads saying, are you going to come and join us in the summer? And I remember speaking to John Gregory over a certain situation, but that was quite some time ago.
We've got a goal here.
Yeah, Rob, we're going to have to come to you after the break. Rob is going to tell you all about Wales going behind inside 8 minutes in Turkey. It's just the start Rob Paisley's side didn't need after that home defeat to Armenia on Friday. Wales behind away to Turkey. News of that and all tonight's games after the break.